Karak Eight Peaks is one of the most important locations in the Warhammer world. Although in other videos we will primarily focus on the 6,000 year history of this great hold, there are other aspects that need to be explored, quite literally. Today's topic will be on the ancient kingdom's geography, for to truly understand the Queen of the Silver Depths, it is crucial to know the layout of the hold and its territories. As Karak Eight Peaks is the largest dwarf hold in existence, with the one exception of Karak, there is quite a bit of ground to cover. We'll begin with the physical structure, starting with the Eight Peaks themselves, then cover the surface city before descending into the depths beneath. The final subject of the video will be giving a rough understanding of how the territory is broken up between the three factions vying for dominance of Karak Eight Peaks, those being the dwarves of Clan Angrund, the Skaven of Clan Moors, and the Greenskins of the Crooked Moon tribe. So, without further ado, let's begin. The first thing to note about Vala-Azrilungol is how cleverly the hold was placed due to the natural defenses provided by the treacherous mountains surrounding it. In order to get an especially large force into Karak Eight Peaks, one will need to approach through Death Pass, or Uzkul Kadran, from the west, which requires crossing under the shadow of Karak Draz. Once past the Fallen Hold, a short march through Uzkul Kadran will lead over the wondrous dwarf-crafted bridge from ancient times known as Death's Crossing. Designed to allow entire legions to cross with ease, the stone bridge grants access past the northernmost mountain and the eastern side of the hold. Continuing down this portion of the pass will eventually round a small series of peaks known as the East Horn, that marks the edge of what makes up Karak Eight Peaks and down into a deep valley forest. Finally, the journey through the tall mounted pines will lead to the ancient and unbreakable East Gate of Legend. With a few minor exceptions we'll discuss later, this is the only way into Karak Eight Peaks, unless one feels inclined to trek over deadly terrain, full of scree slopes and sharp rocks. This relatively small road leading into the hold has played a massive role in why sieges of Vala-Azrilungol have always been unsuccessful. Furthermore, during the golden age of the dwarfs, this was made even more difficult, as Karak Draz effectively checked any threat seeking to sack Karak Eight Peaks. However, since its fall and transformation into the Orc fortress of Blackcrag, the aid Karak Draz once provided has long since ended. Moving on to the hold itself, the next focus will be the towering Eight Peaks that give the hold its iconic name that most of the Warhammer world knows it by. In this section, we'll discuss how several of the mountains bear hidden or fortified spots known as gyrocopter landing pads and doom diver peaks. The landing pads are self-explanatory, but the Doom Diver peaks are essentially goblin-controlled zones where Doom Diver catapults are placed, which allow for excellent vantage points. These then rain down drugged goblin missiles on unsuspecting enemies to devastating effect. With that explained, it's time to explore the Eight Peaks. Starting at the easternmost mountain is Karagnar, the Sunrise Mountain. As its name suggests, this is the peak that the sun climbs over some hours after dawn each morning. Easily the most exposed mountain to the predations of any who might be using Death Pass, this mountain has relatively little upon it compared to its sister peaks. The most notable feature is a sharp minor peak on its eastern flank known as the East Horn, which marks the border of what makes up the ancient realm. Karagnar also bears a single gyrocopter landing pad on one of its lower slopes, and one of the so-called Doom Diver peaks on its second highest peak. Of course, the base of this mountain connects to the East Gate in a masterfully uninterrupted line of stone, thanks to the wondrous craftsmanship of the ancient dwarves. The next peak in line when going clockwise is the eternally snow-capped mountain named Kvin Weir, or the White Lady. Considered by the dwarves to be the most beautiful of the 8 peaks, she was the last mountain to be taken so long ago during the fall of Vala-Azrilungol. With the base of Cyfyn supporting the other half of the East Gate, it plays a major role for any who wish to control the only reliable entrance into the city. Among its slopes and steeps, the main feature upon the White Lady is a series of smaller peaks known as the Sentinels, that watch over the hold and prevent access for those seeking to flank the East Gate by scaling the surrounding terrain. It is the closest peak to the Citadel, occupied by King Belegar, and thus the dwarves have notable control over it and have a single gyrocopter landing pad roughly halfway up the mountain. To the southwest of Cyfyn lies Karak Monar, the Shadow Mountain. Named as such due to spending majority of the day darkened by its sister peaks, this mountain is like most in that it is hotly contested between the Crooked Moon tribe and the Angrund clan. It bears a Doomdiver peak on its northern face overlooking the valley, making up the surface of Karak Eight Peaks, while on the southern side, a gyrocopter landing pad stands ready to receive Dawi messengers from their southern ally Karak Azul. At the far southern base of Karak Monar lies the ruins of the once prosperous Diamond Helm mines, though those abandoned halls have been home to only monsters and dust for millennia now. The southernmost of the 8 peaks is Karak Rin, known more commonly as Mount Redstone. As the name implies, this mountain possesses a fascinating reddish hue in its rock and clay compared to its sister peaks. However, the true uniqueness of Mount Redstone is a secret path known only to the dwarves, which allows a narrow entry point into the surface city. Discovered by Grunfin Goldgather years before the first expedition by Belegar Ironhammer, this hidden route played a key role in his successful 4th attempt to claim a foothold in Vala-Azrilungol. Beyond that, it harbors another one of the gyrocopter landing pads, which guards the Guzur mines operating on the southern base of Karak Rin. Lastly, between Karak Rin and Karak Yar, the next of the peaks we'll be looking at, rests Morzun's Wall, which once guarded critical territory to the west of Karak Eight Peaks during the Golden Age before the fall. When the sun dips down below the horizon at each day, the last of the peaks to feel its warm kiss is Karak Yar, aptly meaning the Sunset Mountain. This mountain plays host to numerous battles in the depths, because it has an entrance on both the western and eastern sides that lead into the darkness under Karak Eight Peaks. The western portal is known as the West Gate, a mighty twin to the legendary East Gate, except it leads into the heart of Karak Yar instead of the surface city. As the Great Doors are part of the mountain face itself, they have not granted access to any since the hold fell into ruin. At the base of the Sunset Mountain lies the main entrance into the depths of Karak Eight Peaks from the surface city. Although watched over by a minor peak sporting a gyrocopter landing pad, this area is nearly always dominated by greenskins. The largest of the 8 peaks is the colossal majesty known as Karak Zilfin, the windswept mountain. Barraged by constant howling winds that bring an icy chill most of the year, the constant erosion has formed numerous massive caverns and tunnels over the millennia. These have made it the ideal home for Skarsnik's hordes, and the greenskins completely infest the entirety of the mountain. In the deep caves can be found crucial elements of Skarsnik's forces, such as the Wyvern Caves on the highest steeps, where the ill-tempered beasts breed, or the Broken Tooth Encampment, where the war boss's favorite orc tribe has set up camp in recent years. A Doomdiver peak rests upon the closest high point overlooking the surface city, and the ominous entry into the depths at the base of Karak Zilfin, known as the Grim Gates. Having been forced open in ages past by giants and worse, the grim gates stand at the top of a zigzag pathway that leads all the way down from the mountain into Goblin Town, at the center of the valley. Most importantly, however, the windswept mountain is where Skarsnik's lair resides, his favorite ledge from which to peer down at the citadel and scheme on how to wipe out both the ratties and stunties who threaten his dominance. Karak is the great peak that guards the northern reaches of Vala-Azrilungol. Translating to mean Silverhorn, the mountain acts as the primary guardian against any unfriendly armies seeking to march through Death Pass. Resting on the slopes facing the dwarf-built bridge discussed earlier, known as Death's Crossing, a ruined fortress called the Silver Tower observes all seeking to pass. Although a crumbling shadow of its former glory, it does provide the Night Goblins with an excellent defensive rally point and protects the Doomdiver Peak just above. On the opposite side of Karak from the Silver Tower lies the Spider Notch Caves, which are a breeding ground for fierce cave spiders that creep through claustrophobic dark spaces despite their size. No forest goblin tribe has managed to discover and tame them, yet. Visible from the lofty Spider Notch Caves is the Silver Tarn, which is the largest body of water found above ground in Karak Eight Peaks. East of the Tarn lie several smaller sharp peaks, which contain a gyrocopter landing pad that is the northernmost one for contact with Karak. The Silverhorn does have one other notable feature, which is a massive slope south of the main mountain known as the Burnt Cliffs, though whether this name is due to a natural appearance or scarring from ancient battles is impossible to say. Finally, to the southeast of Karak can be found a minor range of sharp peaks that possesses both a gyrocopter landing pad and Doomdiver Peak, overlooking the eastern fringe of the natural amphitheater below. The last of the 8 peaks is none other than Karak, the Crescent Mountain. Another exceptionally tall structure, even when compared to its sisters. Karak upper reaches have another pair of gyrocopter landing pad and Doomdiver Peak from which to scout or punish those marching through Death Pass. Despite its strategic position, Karak inhospitable slopes proved resistant to the dwarves' attempts to tame it during the Golden Age. Near its base rest only 2 points of interest that the Dawi and Greenskins battle for control of. The King's Gates on the western face are guarded by the Crescent Mountain's landing pad, while the Doomdiver Peak protects the ruins of Und Uzgar, the watchpost of the dead in the east. Both locations, once glorious in their prime, are now rarely if ever used. To the south lurks the dwarf-controlled watchpost named Zonspire. This Sunspire, as it translates to, once having had an important relationship since it sits between the Crescent and Sunrise Mountains. However, this purpose has been lost to time. Now that the actual 8 peaks themselves have been covered, the next place to focus on is the surface city. The natural amphitheater caused by the mountains can generally be split into 3 sections. The first is the northern region of the valley, which is simply a massive hole known in modern times as the Endless Pit. Legend says that the pit was formed thousands of years ago during the final battle between the Skaven and Greenskins to see who would claim true dominion over the fallen hold. Sometime during the fighting, a colossal explosion tore through the earth above the subterranean battlefield, and the ceiling came crashing down. This gaping wound in Karak Eight Peaks stands as a reminder of the climax from that long-forgotten war by the 2 destructive races. Although not truly endless, the pit is deep enough that any attempts to explore it will only result in death. In contrast to the unsettling quiet found in the endless pit, the largest and lowest part of the valley is occupied by a chaotic mess called Groby Town, or Goblin Town. A disgusting stain on the natural beauty Karak Eight Peaks is famed for, this camp is where all the greenskins who seek to join Skarsnik tend to gather. Made up primarily of orcs and goblins who aren't accustomed to the cloying darkness beneath the earth, Groby Town is in a perpetual state of violence, as bored greenskins fight amongst themselves for entertainment. Occasionally, the bosses under Skarsnik's command will come out and recruit the hordes, who are then led into the entrance to the City of Pillars at the base of Karak, whether to combat Skaven, dwarves, or worse things in the depths. Unfortunately for the dwarves, all attempts to destroy Groby Town have proven fruitless, since even if completely razed to the ground, new greenskins quickly just swarm back in to set up their ramshackle camps and dung towers. It should be noted, though, that according to some legends, if enough orcs and goblins gather in Groby Town, they'll be naturally driven to construct a huge stone effigy in the crude image of their gods. One such idol currently resides in the center of the camps, though to what purpose remains to be seen. The final portion of the valley rests upon a high plateau above Groby Town, fully separated thanks to the impenetrable Great Gate of Defiance. It is here that the true surface city of Karak Eight Peaks resides, guarded by a clever series of rotated square walls to provide the maximum defense against outside invaders. Although much of it still lays in ruins, the dwarves have made exceptional progress in repairing the damage done over the last 2,000 years of enemy occupation. Expertly designed dwarf roads carefully divide the city into proper districts for merchants, craftsmen, and even inns used by foreign allies helping to explore the depths. At the center of the city resides the most important piece of the entire surface, the Citadel. This towering fortress is the functioning capital of Karak Eight Peaks, and is where the dwarves have dug themselves in for the eternal siege, providing them with the highest quality defense and a strong vantage point of the surrounding terrain. So long as Belegar maintains control here, his cause will fight on. Lastly, as may be obvious, the surface city of the dwarves connects via a sturdy stone road to the east gate itself, and the one bastion preventing endless tides of greenskins, ogres, and monsters from just smashing their way in. That about covers the entirety of the surface. To help explain the underground parts of Karak Eight Peaks in a digestible way, I should explain some vocab terms, essentially. We're going to look at how most dwarf holds are built, and then go from there, just so there is a groundwork to work from. So, dwarf holds, traditionally, are always split into 4 sections. The upper deep is the first, which is the level found immediately after entering the Great Gate that makes up the main entrance into the hold. It's usually known as the first deep, and it typically contains the entrance hall, barrack rooms, audience chambers, and guard rooms. The lower deeps constitute all the levels beneath that until reaching roughly the 7th level, or deeps as they're actually known. These deeps are usually broken down as follows. The second deep contains the merchant halls, clan halls, barracks where clan standards are typically kept, armories, the king's court, council chambers, the throne room, and galleries for like art and such. The third deep, which is the level beneath that, contains the great hall, guild halls for, say, metalsmiths, carpenters, rope wrights, candle makers, miners, stonecutters, and masons, breweries, ale stores, kitchens, drinking and feasting halls, and pantries. The fourth deep contains the King's Chambers, the Royal Clan Hall, the esteemed guild halls, such as runesmiths, jewelsmiths, goldsmiths, brewmasters, and engineers, the Loremaster's chambers, the library, scribes' chambers, more armories, the hammerer barrack room, trophy rooms, counting rooms for gold, servants' quarters, and guard rooms. The fifth deep typically contains further armories, the foundries, the forges, workshops, and all of the powder rooms for black powder and such. The sixth deep contains all of the shrines and temples, the Hall of Remembering, and the Hall of Deeds. The vaults are then the remaining levels occupied by the ancient dwarves and are the deepest parts of the hold. These deeps are usually broken up as follows. The seventh deep contains the treasure vaults, the King's Hoard Room, and the Ancestor Chambers. The eighth deep contains tombs, burial chambers, and preparation rooms for burial. The ninth deep contains all of the mines, more barrack rooms, additional clan halls, and refectories, or smaller versions of the drinking and feasting halls you would find on the third deep. So far we covered the upper deep, which is just the first level, and everything above that. The lower deeps, which is the second through the sixth deep. The vaults, which are traditionally the seventh deep through the ninth deep. And then below the ninth deep, or the lowest vault, lies what is known as the Underdeep. This is always a dark and foreboding realm where foul things lurk and death awaits the unwary. No dwarf of sound mind will venture into the Underdeep without extreme cause, and it is here where adventurers or fools are most likely to meet burrowing skaven or ancient monsters. Best left avoided. Now, with all of that in mind, when compared to the other dwarf holds found across the World's Edge Mountains, Karak Eight Peaks is rather unusual, due to having a massive amount of the hold being above ground, roughly a third of it. Thankfully, here we have a map showing off the major portions of the hold, and the two most important mountains for the conflict of the hold, Karak Zilfin and Karak Loon. It should be noted before we dive in that this particular map was drawn up leading into the end times, and wasn't designed with all of the prior storylines in mind. So you may note there are some inconsistencies with where some rooms are placed and such, because this map was explicitly just designed for the end times portion of Karak Eight Peaks' story. Finally, due to the sheer volume of information dumped on this particular map, it will be easiest to break down the depths of Karak Eight Peaks by tackling each faction's zone of influence one at a time. The first faction's territory we'll explore is that belonging to the dwarves of Clan Angrund, led by King Belegar Ironhammer. Owning the least amount of territory, most of what the Dawi have claimed is above ground, such as the entirety of the surface city surrounding the citadel, in addition to the East Gate. When looking below the earth, Belegar maintains control over the upper deep throughout most of Karak Eight Peaks, and a fair amount of the second deep on the southern half. On the map provided, the dwarves control everything below Karak Loon and the citadel until reaching the Underway, labeled here as the Grand Avenue. As mentioned in the history section of Belegar's lore video, the Underway has been cleared out from this point all the way southeast to where it connects with Karak Azul. The western portions, even beneath Karak Eight Peaks, however, remain untraversable due to the debris and terrible monsters. Of the spaces on this map controlled by Clan Angrund, the most important listed locations are the Citadel, the Hall of Clan Skalfdin, and the Hall of Pillared Iron. The Citadel acts as the headquarters for King Belegar, and connects directly to the first and second deep, where he maintains all the most important functioning parts of the hold. The Hall of Clan Sculfdin played host to the largest battle for Karak Eight Peaks during the End Times, which you can learn more about in any of the Karak 8 Peak character lore videos. And finally, the Hall of Pillared Iron is where King Belegar made his last stand, which you can hear about in the End Times section of his video. Moving over to the western half of the map, here lies the domain of Skarsnik's Crooked Moon tribe. Skarsnik controls the most territory of the three factions. His ruthless tactics and intimate knowledge of the City of Pillars granting him notable advantages when it comes to expanding his reach. Owning all of the surface outside the walled city guarded by the Citadel, the Night Goblins also maintain loose control over all of the mountains, with the exception to particular spots where the Stunties have dug in and reinforced. When it comes to depths listed on the map provided, Skarsnik, much like the dwarves, owns everything on the western side of the map down to the Underway, or the Great Stunty Road. Of the spaces on this map controlled by the Crooked Moon tribe, the most important listed locations are the Fungal Forest, the Squig Caverns, Hall of Pillars, and Skarsnik's Lair. The Hall of 1,000 Pillars is not only the single most famous hall in Karak 8 Peaks, but currently operates as the headquarters for Skarsnik and his tribe. Skarsnik's Lair, on the other hand, is more of a retreat for the boss, where he keeps all his complex maps, writings, and concocts his infamous schemes to ruin both Belegar and Queek. The Fungal Forest and Squig Caverns are of course critical to Skarsnik's chaotic empire, and played an integral role in how he became the warlord of the Eight Peaks. But that's a story for a near time. The final faction, and perhaps the deadliest, is of course the countless Skaven of Clan Moors, led by the warlord Queek Headtaker. As one might suspect from those who lurk below, the Skaven control the entirety of Karak 8 Peaks beneath the Underway, so essentially the vaults and below. Over the last few thousand years, the Ratmen have gnawed a truly staggering number of structurally unsound tunnels and caverns into the bedrock from which to invade and conquer the rest of the Fallen Hold. Although they do surge up to devour and sack locations all over the City of Pillars, including even the peaks themselves, ultimately the Skaven struggle to maintain control over anything other than the vaults and the Underdeep. Of the spaces on this map controlled by the Skaven of Clan Moors, the most important listed location are Queek's Trophy Room and the Hall of Reckoning. The Headtaker's Trophy Den is somewhat self-explanatory, but ultimately is Queek's personal den, where he keeps all of the decapitated heads that he's gathered over the years. Despite only being 4 years old in the modern day, the Headtaker has collected hundreds upon hundreds of heads and other trophies. From humans, greenskins, dwarves, Skaven, and even terrifying monsters like his beloved Manticore skull. When it comes to the headquarters of Clan Moors, that actually proves relatively difficult to pinpoint due to Queek's madness and how Skaven dens tend to collapse or be abandoned in favor of new ones on a regular basis. Queek's Trophy Den is one of the few consistent locations in the Underdeep, but the main gathering place for the Headtaker's armies and where he tends to rally all of his forces when he's about to march for war is the Hall of Reckoning. This traditionally acts as the main undercity for the City of Pillars, but it has moved numerous times. With that, we have concluded the geography portion of Karak 8 Peaks. I hope this provides anyone interested with some fascinating maps and materials to give a better background for the stories of Belegar, Skarsnik, and Queek. Speaking of that degenerate Headtaker, I sense another legendary lore video burrowing up from beneath.